Welcome to episode 7 of Ask Woodford. I'd like to thank, as always, my producer behind the camera, Alex Sandalis. Thank you for the countdown, Alex. I really appreciate that. You're going to make me look like an absolute dick now with that, if I don't make myself look like a dick normally. All right, episode 7. Really good feedback from last episode. It meant a lot to me because it was something that I'm very passionate about, as you guys know, and I know it's always a good episode. Al, what do you think?
No, I think it was one of the realest episodes we've done.
Yeah, I thought it was very good. So I really appreciate your questions. They're coming in thick and fast. Once again, if you want to ask a question, PM Woodford Woodford Facebook.
Or comment below. And then hashtag Ask a Woodford. Alex, ask away. All right. First one from Sam Wadley from Brisbane.
Sam?
Exercise sports science student. Loves your work. In terms of a conventional back squat, he's been told at uni that an individual shouldn't squat lower than past the point they begin to start to anterior pelvic tilt. While anatomically this makes sense, I wanted to get your point of view on it from a practical, real-world perspective.
It wouldn't be anterior pelvic tilt, it'd be posterior pelvic tilt. You know they do the butt wick when they squat? So what's he asking? What's he asking?
For your conventional back squat...
Yes.
He's been told at uni that a person shouldn't squat lower than past the point they anterior pelvic tilt.
It's not anterior, it'd be posterior.
So you want to get your perspective on that.
Okay, number one, it'd be posterior, not anterior, because when you squat...
Because anterior would be that, right?
Yeah, no, okay, watch. And now, can you get diagrams here? Can you put... That's anterior?
Yeah.
That's posterior. So you got to think, if I'm anterior, what am I shortening, Al? Hip flexors and erectors, right?
Yeah.
And I'm on stretch my abs and my glutes. Tilt posteriorly, my glutes switch on, my abs switch on, and I'm on stretch to my hip flex and my erectors. You guys understand that? Okay? Yes? No? Yes? Okay.
No, it makes sense.
So, look at it again. Diagram. Anterior, posterior. When you squat, and when you go deep into the hole, and that past 90 position, what you're going to get is you're going to get a posterior pelvic tilt, posterior pelvic tilt, and then you're going to come an anterior pelvic tilt. Okay, so that posterior pelvic tilt is actually called butt winking. Listen, I'm not the greatest expert on this stuff. Like, this is more like someone who actually understands powerlifting real well, the biomechanics of powerlifting with a squat. You got to realize I don't train string sport athletes, and I'll be completely honest with you. My opinion on this is real, just coming from my background. So you might ask a strength sport athlete his opinion on this. You might ask a strength sport coach on this. Probably they're better to ask than myself. But my opinion on it is I've had guys, like just my coaching experience on this, I've had guys who... There's only one guy I've had issues with his massive butt wig in the bottom of the squat, and it was ridiculous. Like, I'm talking massive. And they still don't understand fully why people butt wig. Everyone's got their own opinions of it. I've got no opinion on it. I don't really care because most of my guys squat to a box because I don't train. My boys don't have to squat full range. I don't believe you have to squat full range. Like, once you start training, and I'm not talking about strength sport athletes, like this, and this can lead into another question though, but everyone always talks about ass to grass squats and like you have to squat ass to grass for it to be effective. You've never trained a non-strength sport athlete then, really, in my opinion. Because everyone knows, you look at for a field-based sport athlete, for a non-strength sport athlete, you do not have to squat to depth. Now, am I saying that you don't need to squat to depth at all? No, I've got athletes in a cycle, and we can use it as a variance in stimulus where they will go to depth. But all things being equal, especially in season, you just want to get that stimulus, get them in, get them out. You're not going to waste the time. So, look, and especially if you've got a big group and you need to cue them and coach them, squatting to a box is easier. The box is a real good coaching cue for them because it gets them to push back at the hips, understand where parallel is, gives them that awareness around their body. So they touch the box, you hit that consistency of depth every time they drive up. So I really like box squatting. Remember, there's two types of squat we coach here at Woodford. A box squat, which is a pause, but it's not like Louis Simmons' negative shin angle box squat. You'll see that they go real wide like this, like real wide with their stance. It's that negative shin angle. Okay, so real wide. And that's for quick powerlifting. So we just do a box squat, which is a pause. We're dissipating that stretch reflex, and a squat to box, which is a soft touch and drive up using that elastic energy. So that's how we cue our box squats. In terms of the answer you want to give me, I've really got, as I said, the only one I can really refer back to is, and the issue that the only one I've ever had issue was one athlete. And he was getting he was squatting to depth and he was getting a massive posterior pelvic tilt. massive anterior pelvic, and we couldn't work it out. Like I remember I couldn't work it out for ages. I just took him to the box. He wasn't a strength sport athlete. Always remember when you train an athlete, it's always risk versus reward. So you got to look at it that way, and you got to realize lifting's not their sport. Okay, so you got to remember that. So always remember, do they need to squat to depth in their sport? No, you can just use the box. So for me, he was getting too much of that pelvic tilt. There's been other guys that are fine, but I vary. There's still times that when I do squat my athletes to depth, and sometimes I don't. So I really got no opinion on it. Even the best minds in the world don't understand it. So my take on it is, if you're getting a massive amount of it, just be careful. Put them to a box for a while, or improve. Maybe it might be, I don't even know, maybe their mobility. I don't know. I haven't really thought that in depth about it. But as I said, I can only go off what I've known as Alex goes downstairs. I feel like I'm talking to myself here. So pretty much that's it. Just as I said before, just be careful with it, monitor it. If they are getting pain through it, switch it back to a box and then see how you go with that. Alex, next question, son. I hope that answers it, but
Answer the best here.
Well, to my ability, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Fong Tran, he's a Taekwondo instructor.
Taekwondo. Bailey Lewis, the king.
Would you program an accumulation phase for athletes who don't want to put muscle mass on? Some sports have weight divisions, or some athletes fear that increased muscle mass can lead to immobility, like gymnasts, dancers, ballet,
correct,
who favour a small frame. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so at the moment I train a kid who's ranked 1 in Australia, like top 20 in the world, Taekwondo. So this kind of relates to him as well. Bailey Lewis. And I've trained him for the last 3.5 years. And he's a perfect example. He's under 54 kilos. And you always got to remember, if it's that weight class, you have to be careful with it. But most of the time, nutritional intervention, like example, a big part of accumulation and building muscle mass is nutrition. And if you don't eat right, you're not going to grow. So if you don't have the appropriate carbohydrate and protein, which is the building blocks of muscle, you're never going to grow. So that's the first part of the equation. You have to eat, but also then you've got to provide a sufficient amount of the stimulus in terms of your load parameters, your volume, your intensity, your frequency as well. So you've got to realise the two factors to force output of improving strength and power for the athlete, which is A, the volume of the muscle, the cross-section area, and B, the extent which nervous system can activate. So you can't be always just placing an intensification stimulus on the athlete, because they're going to plateau out at some point, because we know for a fact those neural adaptations, if we look at the neural versus muscle morphology adaptation and strength gain, if you can put the photo of that up there, so it's novice. So when a novice first starts training, a novice is an untrained individual, there's a time course of adaptation and strength gain. So it's neural, and this was my honours project, why I know so much. So it's a graph, and it's got, if you write in, Alex, you'll find the graph, neural versus muscle morphology, just write neural versus hypertrophy factors in the development of strength in novice individuals. And what we find was, when a novice first lifts, massive neural adaptation early on. We know that because we get 3 adaptation: neural, muscular, motor learning, skill acquisition. So most of the time when a novice lifts, it's that skill acquisition phase. It's nervous system becoming more efficient, activated, deactivated motor units during that specific motor pattern, muscular motor pattern, time and coordination. So you see that massive neural adaptation. And then what happens with the neural adaptation after 4 to 6 weeks? Excuse me. Jesus. That neural adaptation plateaus. You're laughing. Neural adaptation plateaus, and what takes over the determinants of strength is that muscle morphology, which is muscular hypertrophy, and hypertrophy increases the size of the muscle. So it is important to program accumulation phases, because we want to increase the size of the muscle. Now, there's actually 2 types of hypertrophy, and supposedly it's been found to be wrong. So this might not be up to date. I'm not sure. Personally, I'm more the practical side of it. Like, you still do grow. Like, here's another thing which people talk about a lot. You still do grow when you train 2 reps. So if you look at can we have graphs here? Neural versus metabolic loading. So this is more, if we look at rep continuum, low to high rep, right? So if we've got here low reps, 1 rep, 2 rep, 3 rep, high rep, 10 to 20 rep through here. So this is neural adaptation. This is metabolic muscle adaptation, right? Down here, we know we're going to get, if you're lifting heavy weight for low rep, we're going to get more neurological adaptation. We know that. If we're lifting more high rep, 10 to 20 rep, we know we're going to get more metabolic, more muscular adaptation. Now, regardless, you cannot dissociate. You can't have one, not the other, right? So let's say we're hitting heavy singles, heavy doubles, heavy triples. Yes, you're going to get more neurological adaptation, but you're still going to get some sort of muscle morphology. It's not like you're going to say to your muscular system, hey, no, we're not going to get any muscular adaptation out of doing 2 to 3 reps. You still grow off 2 to 3 reps, but we know for muscular hypertrophy, there's 3 factors. Number 1, ding, mechanical tension. Number 2, ding, metabolic stress. Number 3, muscle damage. So we know those 3 factors plus nutritional intake will affect muscle morphology. Can we know that? Right? So we know muscle volume is critical for hypertrophy. So let's say we do 5 sets of 3 reps. We know we're going to get some decent growth because it's to do with the volume, the sets, right? But for an athlete, we know if we're doing 5 sets of 3 that's heavy, we know it's heavy and neurally taxing. So not all athletes can do that. So we look back at the question that you're asking me. Yes, it's important to go between the two. Yes, you need to do some sort of accumulation phase, but also it comes down to the athletes understanding their body as well. Like, you got to realize a lot of athletes, like especially Bailey, hasn't put on a lot of size because he's just not meant for that weight class. Everyone's going to have, like, you look at the MMA, you got some athletes who can cut down, but it's pretty dangerous. But a lot of athletes cut down heavily to make that weight because MMA's perfect example is when they cut down when they're doing a heavier weight, because if they're a heavier weight, they've got a greater chance of winning. Yes, it's very, and this is where a good nutritionist dietitian, you need to get a good nutritionist dietitian to work with you about the calories in, calories out, and how to do it properly, because a lot of the athletes get either pull out or they get sick because their weight cuts too much and their body just goes into shock. So it's very important, and you look at Bailey, 54 kilos, maybe you want to tag him in this, he's got an athlete page. At 54 kilos, he always hovers around 56, 58, and then he just cuts 4 or 5 kilos. He's always around, just for Bailey, he's always around that. And yeah, we do accumulation phases with him all the time because I understand the importance of, you can't always just be providing that high intensity intensification stimulus. It's just not going to work because he's not going to improve because he's just going to plateau out.
It's too neurally taxing.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, but also remember the 2 factors. 1, the volume of muscle. 2, the extent which nervous system is activated. So we want that muscular size, but also we want to activate it via the nervous system. That's why we go in between accumulation and intensification phases. Accumulation phase, if you want to give little dot points here, accumulation phase is classified with high volumes, middle rest period, and that's what's going to really increase muscular size. And we look at intensification, high intensity. Now, intensity could be load or speed. High intensities, lower volumes, longer rest periods. Oh, g'day, mate. How you going? Tasmanian workshop. We'll drop that in a second. Maybe put the Tasmanian link on that as well. And also longer rest periods for that. Shorter rest periods for accumulation. So, and that's why I always go in between. Also going on my 2 factors, there's people talk about this. I don't know if this is true anymore, but there's 2 types of muscular hypertrophy. Myofibrillar and sarcoplasmic. Myofibrillar is functional hypertrophy, sarcoplasmic is non-functional. Myofibrillar is increased size of muscle while increasing force generating capacity. Sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is increased size of muscle while not increasing force generating capacity. We want functional hypertrophy, but I don't know if that's true anymore. I don't know. As I said, I'm not an academic. That's what academics are for. All I know is it's very important to increase muscle. You want to increase muscular size. You know, even though I don't talk about that a lot because I talk about the nervous system adaptations, how developing the nervous system can improve time and coordination within the athlete. So I'm always interested to hear that stuff, but I think it's very important you do phases of accumulation and phases of intensification, because at some point the nervous system will plateau out, and that's why you need muscular size, because regardless, you're going to grow off doing intensification, but it's up to you. I mean, it's still less of a stimulus on the nervous system, but when you're doing high volumes of work, it's still a stress on the nervous system as well. So you're taxing the nervous system through heavier load work, lighter load, fast velocity work, but also you tax the nervous system by doing high volume work, metabolic fatigue work, where you're developing. And you've got to realise a byproduct of doing hypertrophy work is lactate and hydrogen ions, because we know when lactate accumulation overtakes lactate removal, we get increased hydrogen ions, lower pH, increase acidity in muscle, inhibit nerve conduction. So that's a taxing of the nervous system. So you got to weigh up both options. That's a lot of information.
Yes, it is.
There you go.
All right. Arthur Tiger Pitt on Facebook. We'd like to know your views on weight belts and when to use them. He's seen Sandor wear it once in his return videos.
Yeah.
Seen a lot of people using them. when I don't think it's necessary, and then he puts in brackets, use better form equals no weight belt. My other question is, can you recommend any other performance gym? Okay, let's go to that first question about weight belts.
Yeah. Weight belts are really good for intra-abdominal pressure. So it's like a belt from the anterior all the way to posterior. You've got that circumferential, that stabilisation. I think it's really good for heavy loads. If you're going for heavy loads, I think it doesn't harm you. Why not use them? But saying that though, you're not training strength sport athletes, but once they get to a decent weight that's of their relative strength, that's heavy, I think that if it's not going to harm them, we use them. Do I always use them? No, of course not. I don't think you should use them as long as you teach the athlete how to brace, how to stabilise the core. No issue with it. But when they're going heavier, you need to. I think I like my guys to wear them. You don't have to get your guys to wear them, but I do. I think it's if it's not going to, my rules, if it's not going to harm them, use them. And we use it every so often, especially a guy like Sandor who's lifting heavy, especially heavy relatively to his own body weight as well, so we use them. Yeah.
And then the second part was, can you recommend any other performance gyms in Australia or Perth where he's located? Or coaches and academics that he can search in Australia?
In Perth.
Could be no. Maybe you can't.
Yeah. Tim Frey from Helix. Helix Performance. I don't know if you want to tag him in that. Tim Frey from Helix Performance. And Corey Green for Athletic Institute. So they're the two that I'll recommend.
All right.
Yeah. And no, I won't be going to Perth anytime soon. I won't be. There'll be Woodford. Won't be. We won't be going interstate ever. This will be.
You got to fly to Sydney for that.
Yeah, you got to.
May 29th.
If you ever, people ask me, am I going interstate? No, never happened now because Woodford brand is.
You're doing it.
What's that?
But you're doing it.
No. What I'm talking about is the I'll never have a gym interstate. I don't think. Nah, unless. Yeah, it's just too hard to manage. We know from experience. People always ask me that. No, I won't be able. I wanted to at the start, then I realised the logistics of it, and we know the background of what Woodford's gone through with expansion. It won't be happening. Look, if you ever want to see what we do, workshops the best way when I come up, and but those two are real good. They're evidence based. They train athletes. They're actually science and art, and they apply it and they get results. So
right. Luke Savadogo, he's a second time question asker. He's learned so much from you when he started following you. He's the same guy from Lebanon who asked you the question a few episodes back.
Oh, you're in Lebanon.
He noticed people incorporating a lot of mini bands
on
the levels of knees when it comes to hip thrusts and squats. Can you explain why the role of the bands is here? Like why we use bands?
Okay. So the mini bands above for squats and stuff like that. Okay.
And
so
hip thrusts.
I'll give you an example. I'll use it in the hip thrust, right? So to hit the glutes, there's three main movements, right? Hip extension, abduction, external rotation. But if we look at the 5 roles of the glutes, abduct the hip, extend the hip, externally rotate the hip, tilt the pelvis posteriorly, and the 5th one, which is most important in my opinion, is stabilise the hip. So the glutes have got 5 roles, and I want to think the glutes are the powerhouse of the athlete. If you want to jump high, run quick, change direction more effectively, you need the glutes. But moreover, the glutes prevent from injury, and they protect the lower back, the hip, the hamstring and the knee. So the glutes have many roles for performance and prevention. So it's critical, and I talk about it all the time. People go, why do you talk about the glutes all the time? Like you're obsessive with them. Because I see, and I told you this, Alex, I said the more times, when I started, the more times I coach, and I call it coaching reps, the better I see something, the more I see a pattern emerging in my coaching, what works, what doesn't work. And that's the art of being a coach. So you see a lot of students come out with these degrees, and they can't piece together, like they've got that knowledge, but they can't, that applied knowledge is still not there, so what works in the real world? So it's always funny to see them, and then they're like, oh, why are you talking about the glutes so much? Is because the more times I coach, the more times I see a pattern. The biggest pattern I see, and this is not all for all athletes, but I see all the time, athletes rock in, they like a few things. One, hip mobility, if not most all the time, they sit down too much, their hips are tight. Most people have that, right? Ankles, not so much every so often. They might sprain their ankles, haven't done the proper rehab, don't have that ankle dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, they have the mobility. Second thing I see all the time is lack of glute activity. What I mean by that is their glutes have low level connection, okay? You might call it glute amnesia. I forgot where I heard that from, but anyway, glute amnesia is a good word. So they might be real low level glute activity. The third thing I see is very weak as well. They're the big three things. They're weak for their lower body in terms of squatting, deadlifting, those big primal movements. So we go back to the mini band work, we look at the hip thrust. and I talk about the 3 movements that hit the glutes: abduction, extension, external rotation. If we look at a hip thrust, the hip thrust is real good because it hits the glutes at a hip extension, which is the main glute max. What I use the band for is when the athlete comes up and bridges hip extension, I get the athletes to abduct and hit the smaller glutes, the glute minimum, the smaller glutes to stabilize the hip, and they push their knees out. That's why sometimes you see me pushing their knees into their abduct out and they create that torque at the hips to stabilize the glutes, stabilize the hips. So not only are we hitting the big glutes, but also we hit the smaller glutes as well. So that's why I use the band during all those little movements, the abduction, extension, the abduction, external rotation movements, is those smaller stabilizers really hits them as well. So we're getting 2 birds, 1 stone really there. So not only hit extension, but we're hitting abduction as well. And the more times you can hit the glutes neurologically, the better for the athlete, in my opinion, for athlete performance, but also injury reduction. So once again, bring back the rule. If it doesn't harm them, do it. I've always done it. And what I've seen with the correlation is the correlation for my rehab, injury prevention, and performance. I've get results. And the only thing I care about is results for my athletes. And I see it all the time. And people don't, the posterior chain is king for the athlete. The upper back, the glutes, the hamstrings, the calves, critical. Critical for athlete development, injury reduction.
All right.
Answer your question?
Yes. Do you screen, this is I am James from YouTube. Do you screen every athlete before they start a program with yourself? If so, what does the screening involve?
We so what we do is we screen. I screen them on my big 6. So they come in. Let's say someone first comes in, right? This will be the last question that I'm going to coach.
Yeah.
So someone comes in. Let's say someone first comes in and they hired me. Could be for rehab, could be for performance-based work. I used to do, when we had our physio here, we used to do just a red flag screening, just to bring up any red flags in terms of a biomechanical, they do their musculoskeletal screening, right? That's not my area. When they come downstairs, I always look at my big 6. So I've got a few movements I look at. My first one is a hinge. So number 1, I look at how they hinge. Okay, a hinge is a big one because most athletes are very core dominant, overdeveloped anterior chain. Most time they go to the gym, they're squatted before their lunge, their leg press, big anterior quad dominant movements, but they haven't hinged properly. Now we know hinging is critical because 1A develops a posterior chain, develops eccentric work to their hamstrings, but also it's really important to develop the posterior chain. I've talked about it numerous times. So a lot of them can't hinge. So that's the first one I look at. I look at a hinge. I look at a squat, not top down, bottom up. I look at the squat, how they sit up in their position. Then the third movement I look at is a hip thrust because it trains the posterior chain, not straight leg hip extension, which the RDL does, but a bent leg hip extension. Now, depending on the link tension relationship, will dictate which is the prime mover and which is the synergist. Example, if my legs are bent, okay, my knee is bent to knee flexion completely, right? The prime move will be the glutes, not the hamstrings. The hamstrings are fully cut off. Am I saying that there's no contribution to the hamstrings whatsoever? No, because your nervous system can't go during hip extension, because there's two hip extensors of the body. The first one, the glutes, the second one, the hamstring. The hamstring got a dual role to extend the hip, but to flex the knee, right? So when I'm bent leg hip extension, I'm bridging up like that, I can't go to my nervous system. No, cut off complete hamstring activation. I can just minimize it by how flex my leg is. Now, if I extend my leg more, then I bridge up, then I'm going to have more hamstring recruitment. So the perfect example, if you want to see if an athlete's quad dominant, put them in a bridge, get their knees as flexed up their butt as possible, get them on a bridge, they cramp their hamstrings. That says to me, they're too quad dominant, they're going to work on developing their glutes at bent leg hip extension. What I would do is bring their heels out further from their butt, get the bridge out, and let their nervous system adapt to that. As they improve, we can overload the movement by bringing their heels close to their butt. I don't know where the fuck this question was about.
It was about screening out.
Oh, screen. God damn it, I've lost it. So I've gone on tangents here. But I do a hip thrust, and then I superset that with the core movement, anterior rotation movement. They're the big ones. I've screened off that for the last 4 years, and I've seen deficiencies straight off that. Another deficiency that I see is how they walk, like their gait, like how they walk. Is their posture slumped? Do they walk with duck feet? You know, stuff like that. Knock knees. I just watch how they move in their warm up. Because we do activation. But a big one for me is just their movement, like their movement quality when they hinge, when they squat. What do they have? Good body awareness? Like you're picking up cues, everything you're reading off them, and then you pick off that, and then you start to see a pattern of coaching. And then I look at it, and then I've got like Shandor came in. He started at my progression number 1, And how quickly you progress is based off how competent you are. So an elite athlete can start here, but he'll progress on quicker than someone who's never been here before. Because for someone who's never been, who's a novice, they're going to have poor body awareness most likely. So it's about teaching them body awareness, teach them about positioning. Everything is a skill downstairs. You have to set them up properly. Don't get them just to go down there and not think about it. Everything's about feet position, hand position. You know, a lot of people just kind of, especially when they coach, they don't think about feet position, hand position, where should they be loading, how you got to be feeling it. You know, what should I be feeling compared to that move? What should I be feeling? And that's where you got to get by. And you should be feeling this, how you feel about this, you've got to set up like this. And that's the art of being a coach. So when I screen them for my movements. What I like to see, and I have a checklist. So example would be an RDL. What I want to see from an RDL, okay, so can they start in the start position? Can they load their hips? Can they keep their shins vertical? Can they trunk come horizontal? Can they engage their lats? Can they hold at the knee? Can they hold at neutral, 3 points of contact, head, scapula, coccyx? Can they explode up? Can they use hip extension or back extension? Can they squeeze? You get what I'm trying to say. I've got a checklist in my head. I've never written this down, but I've got a checklist that I look for, and that's called experience. If you're a novice, if you're just starting off your coaching career, make a checklist what you want to see. And you don't have to go how I coach it. I coach it because when I look at something, a lot of people in this industry, they look at it like lift the most amount of weight possible. They don't look at it as a skill acquisition, motor learning thing when they first come in. They need to lift the most amount of weight possible because that makes me a good coach. That makes them a good athlete. No, it doesn't. Because for me, power and speed is everything. We're going to improve strength to improve power and speed. Okay, you're not training strength sport athletes. It's perfect example is like when someone comes down and they deadlift. Oh, that's how you wrong deadlift. Well, I'm not fucking training strength sport athletes. I'm looking for a joint angle and neural pattern. Because that's what we train for. I'm just training a neural pattern. Nothing more, nothing less. Training neural pattern, get them out here. And if you look at neural pattern, squat, deadlift. A deadlift's a hip dominant, a squat's a quad dominant. So why the fuck would you want to set them up in a quad dominant pattern doing a deadlift when you can use the squat dominant pattern? And what I look for, general rule of thumb, quad dominant, trunk upright, lost ankle dorsiflexion, hip dominant, shin vertical, trunk horizontal. Not all the case because everyone's going to sit up differently, lever links, all that shit. But that's how I look for. I'm neuro. That's what I look at. I train a neural pattern, nothing more, nothing less. Okay, and my job isn't to lift the most amount of weight possible. Mine's about speed, power, quality. And that's what we want. And if you start understanding that, it's not all about absolute load. It's about relative strength. It's about high. My guys don't miss reps. High quality reps, nervous system stimulating reps, stimulus, adaptation. Athlete trains with their sport, which they get the specific muscular, motor pattern, metabolic pathway, time and coordination. That's athlete performance right there. That's injury reduction right there. But until we start moving away from this bullshit as an industry, like fuck, I don't know why we have this obsession with training fucking. If you're a powerlifter, I respect powerlifters, I respect strength sport athletes, but why the fuck train Nancy, who's like a 55-year-old, like a low bar squad? Why the fuck does she give a shit like that? You know, I don't understood that. Like we've got trainers who want to train like strength sport athletes. Yeah, I don't understand.
I think it's because that's all they know.
But I don't understand that, bro. We need to move away from that as an industry. Strength sport athletes, that's their sport, no issue with that. But for someone who's a 55-year-old and you're low bar squatting them, it's like just incredible. But they just want to come in there and teach them the pattern of squatting, teach them the position of squatting. You know, I got no issue if you want to do that, but at the same time, man, like fuck, we need to start moving away from that as an industry. Like I've just never understood that. Like even when I went through, it's just stimulus, provide the stress, the stimulus, you know, that training effect, get out, let them do their everyday life, what they want to do. So for me, I'll screen off a hinge, a squat, a hip thrust, a parallel press. I'll watch how they move, but moreover, I'm watching how they move the whole time. When they come in, from when they write, from when they mobilise, from when they activate. I'm always watching how they move. How can I make them more efficient? So when you got to realise I train the athletes, not the general pop. But if I was training just general people, just general health and fitness, I'd be looking at how they move as well. Because my job is to make them more efficient in their everyday life. So how can I make them more efficient? Same for an athlete. So from the minute they walk in the door, I'm watching them how they move. What's their posture like? You know, all these little cues I'm picking up. Hopefully that answers the question. It's a long-winded way of answering your question.
Like always.
Yep. So I think we'll call that a day out. So that's episode 7, guys. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. Alex will chuck down the links. Next 3 weeks, big 3 weeks for me. Cobram, maybe you put the things down. Cobram, I will be at 24/7 Fitness in Cobram. 24/7 Fitness. I'll be the week after. I'll be in Sydney at my workshop with Sandor Earl. Link there. We'll be at Camp Down Fitness, and the 3rd week I'll be in Tasmania. First time I've ever been in Tasmania, but in Tasmania at Action Fitness. Get tickets for Sydney. Get tickets for Camp Down Fitness. Get tickets for Tasmania. Get tickets for Future Fitness, guys. That has been episode 7 of Ask Woodford. Thank you very much for your support. If you've got any questions, comment below. Ask Woodford. Thank you for Alex Sandelis, and thank you for everyone for watching. I'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.